Welcome to Coaching in Session,
where limits end and growth begins.
Hosted by Rearden.
This is your space to challenge the ordinary,
unlock your potential,
and step boldly into your next chapter.
Your mindset journey continues.
Welcome, Mackens Audena, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Michael. Pleasure to be on your podcast and looking forward to it.
All right. And I'm glad to have you on. Just a disclaimer, everyone, this man is very important. He's very busy. It was a challenge to get him on the podcast, but he is here with us today. He's a life coach and he's a business consultant, and he's going to be helping us understand all the different aspects to what life and business are going to be. And I just find that when it comes to individuals today, especially, one area is going to thrive and sometimes both fail, right? They need a little backup. They need some support. But sometimes you could be really good at life and in business, maybe not so much, or really good in business and your life is really struggling. And I see this a lot with my clients too, where they have built a career on with their business, but then their family life suffers. And there's like this delicate area of balance that they're trying to create, and they don't necessarily know how to. And then there's just some people trying to say, I'm just trying to find a door so I can get into life and I can get into business. And they're just literally struggling. And there's just so many pressures that they're trying to navigate toward. And all of our conversation today is going to be looking at both and looking at the work that Mackens is doing. If you could, Mackens, can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and of course, how you help people?
Absolutely. You know, one thing that I neglected to mention, I'm also an attorney. So I'm a business attorney, consultant, and I work with men to help them feel powerful in any room that they enter. And how I would do that is ultimately by teaching them how to be their full selves when there's pressure. And I think, you mentioned a ton of different things about how there is a lack of balance. And ultimately, a lot of times we achieve success as a response to pressure. It's something that we're actually running away from. And so we're never fully complete, because whereas we're looking at some financial success, there are other areas that are falling behind because we haven't learned to appropriately respond to pressure. There are so many different ways in that. But when I do my business consulting, I make sure that a big piece of it is touching on the personal side and understanding how pressure affects you.
Mm. What would you say is maybe one of the most important areas to start your focus on when you're working with an individual? Would it be the personal aspect or the business aspect first?
That's a great question. So I would say that I have two different programs. The one that I'm focusing on, the one that I reached out to you on, is on internal stability, and that focuses more on the person. And so I have recently shifted to that just because I see that there's a need. I particularly focus on men because I feel like there is a lot there that we can get into, but we are falling behind. And a lot of that has to do with how we have been trained for pressure by society. That said, what I have done in the past was to start focusing on the business first. That's what I do traditionally as a business consultant. And so it's you identifying a problem and me looking for what that problem could be in the businesses.
The internal stability aspects, especially with culture, and we can use American culture because I think it's going to be maybe easy to understand from many different cultures, is that there's this pressure given to men that they have to be the protectors, the providers, and they have to basically do everything by themselves. They don't get any support. They don't have anyone to back them up. And it's just a fallacy in my mind, because my son, for example, he's very young. He's like 4. I couldn't imagine me just leaving him. If he gets a girl pregnant at 14, I'll take care of it. It's not a problem for me. But I know that conversation is like, even in young men today, like my whole life is over now. And it's just like, it starts from there and then it goes into college and then it goes into their working career. It's just like, I'm fighting this fight by myself. So, what would that conversation be to men trying to stabilize them from what the world is saying that they need to do and accomplish?
Yeah. And you know what the thing is? Great question there. And the thing is, what has happened when men are presented with these responsibilities, with, these mandates of what it actually means to be a man? First and foremost, we don't actually also teach how to do it. And so you're just left out on your own. The second thing is that it tends to backfire because we have no idea precisely what it means. And so the way that we do this typically in society, whether it's with shame or just plainly with the expectation that you succeed, is that we then make it unacceptable to fail. So this is how it's very different for women, for example. Women are not tasked with that kind of success. And so in a way, they succeed despite, but I also believe because they're not tasked with this need to succeed, right? Because what happens is when you're not tasked with the need to succeed, you can afford to fail. You don't have to look like you're always succeeding. And that failure is the one ingredient that's required for actual success. There is no expert that has ever gotten to where they've gotten without actually going through multiple different routes. So I think it was Thomas Edison. Oh, no, maybe one of the guys who had talked about maybe Thomas Edison. He talked about how he found a million ways to not make the light bulb. You can look up the quote because I'm probably messing it up. But the point here is that's how you actually become an expert or whatever it is that you do. You have to be okay with failing. And when we do not give that same ability for men to fail and actually improve upon their failure, we leave them at a disadvantage. We leave them at a point where they don't even approach these sorts of things because they might fail and look completely terrible as a result. So from my perspective, we have to do two things. One is we have to, rethink how we are raising our boys with this whole idea that they have to get all of these things done. This doesn't mean that they shouldn't be taught, responsibility. I'm still traditional. The issue is that, what has been taught as traditional has been, happenstance. Like we stumble upon it. You might have someone, for example, as we talked about earlier on, who maybe is searching for the love of their father, or, they have such a hole, a void that they're trying to fill. They end up being successful because they are running away from something else. And so it seems like they're completely successful, but the training itself for what it takes is not there. The idea of being okay with the iterations that take to improve upon yourself was not taught to them either. And so I do have the idea that we can do this in a much better way. And for me, my story is a personal one as well. I present very well. I did all of the things because I had responsible parents, got the degrees and all of that good stuff, but it didn't take away the fear and what was the potential for me because I was walking around with this fear of failure and how I was being received. And so what I do now, focuses more on folks who are at my level. It's, if we start teaching it from the beginning, then the internal stability is going to be built as they're growing up. But that doesn't mean we give up on the men that are now, raising kids or all that, who can build our communities. And so my program ultimately is trying to fast track that internal stability training so that they can get there.
It's so important today. I could tell you a little bit about me, and I think it's going to really make the conversation extremely forward in what a man's life is or could be. My father, he didn't grow up with a father. He, apparently what had happened was, I guess my grandfather was cheating on my grandmother, and my grandmother didn't want any part of that. So she was like, nope, you're not in my life. You're not in my kid's life, whatever, right? Well, so my dad was like, yeah, I don't have a father. Basically, of course you have to have a father, but he just basically disowned the man. So he had to learn the hard way. He had to learn from his peers. He had to learn from, just watching other men. And basically he was a bad boy. He was in and out of jail, drugs, drinking, all the things you don't want to be doing, he was doing. And it wasn't until he had us and, my brother, myself, and my sister, where he started to kind of calm down, like saying, okay, I have to be a father. And it wasn't, until his mother saying, hey, you have to be a father to your kids. So he basically, say, okay, well, how can I be the father that I was trying to have when I was young, right? So he was, he did the best he could, and he was able to pass the baton quite well for what he was given. And even he had a moment where he could reconcile with his father. He wanted nothing to do with it. He was like, no, I'm good. You're dead to me, basically. So today, I look at that of how young men don't have that. in their life if they don't have a father, the father's absent. There's like a co-parenting situation where maybe the mother is not making it easy for the father to see the child. So there could be a whole array of problems there. And I can't tell you how many young men who look for a good role model for a man, saying, hey, this is a good man to emulate. This is a good man to try to understand, to ask questions to. And I can't tell you how many people from, high school levels, they will reach out, emails, etc., trying to figure out like, hey, like I have this fear inside of me. Like, do I go to college? Do I do this? Like, I don't want to make a mistake. And it's so prevalent there. And I couldn't imagine if they didn't have someone to lean on, like we had our father to lean on, where if we ever had a problem, we can go to him and, he would give us some wisdom, something, right? Or some lecture where it was like, okay, like now we're equipped for whatever is to come our way. But then not everyone has that. So then they look around for a lot of the bad examples. And our world today is filled with so many influencers that can easily be relatable. But most of these influencers are not truly happy. They smile on camera. They say, hey, this is my life. And then so a lot of people think that they have to be that person. They have to develop these type of traits and this type of persona. And all of a sudden now we have an identity crisis where they're not even being true to themselves. So all of this to say is we have a lot of instability because we don't even know what we want. Imagine like a home not knowing what foundation is going to be built upon. Are you going to be building on the beach where the sand is a different type of foundation, the concrete mix we have to use? Are we going to be building on limestone like you would in Texas and clay, where the ground is going to start to move differently, especially in the summer seasons where the ground will crack? It's a different type of building process there, and people don't recognize that. They have to look at where they are and what type of building process needs to be implemented. And all of this is to say that there are many paths a person can go on. There's no right or wrong way, but there has to be some deliberateness of of that man or that young boy to say that I want to be a better version of myself, and it can't be what society is telling you to be. Because if we look at what society is telling young men to be, you don't want to be this because you'll be toxic, right? This masculinity that is being promoted today is toxic. It's like, oh, you don't want to be this type of person. You want to be this person. You want to be, more docile. You want to be more lenient. You want to be more forgiving. You want to be more emotionally intelligent. And I was thinking in my mind, in what world would that be acceptable, especially in American culture, for a man today? And of course, there's going to be different conversations. Could be different times when it could work, because I don't think there's, one size shoe fit all. But, in your own personal, experiences, what would you advise a young man to start to do if they didn't have a strong support system?
Yeah, first and foremost, like kudos to your father for, getting himself together. I think that is very big for folks who are listening to understand that there is redemption anytime you decide to take that on. And a lot of the times, and this is why people, get addictions to begin with. And an addiction is a way for you to kind of relieve pain. So an alcoholic is feeling some level of pain they're trying to get relief from. And a lot of times what happens when we do something bad and we start to attribute it to our own work is like we start to say, well, since it's not worth it, what's the point? Let me just drown away the pain. And we continue down the cycle. And so for a man to say, you know what, I'm going to change that, that's a great and big thing. And I also think that's important for people to know. And probably one of the reasons why it's important to have the father in the house is because you can see him struggling every day. You can see the humanity, especially once you've gotten to a certain age and you no longer see him as the God, you can see, okay, he's going through and trying to figure it out. And so that becomes acceptable for you to also try to figure it out yourself. And that's why, the statistics show that homes with the fathers in the house with only the fathers in the house do much just as well as both parents. And homes where it's just a single mother doesn't do as well. So fathers are very important. And so what would I say for a person who does not have that in the home? It's a very, if you're hearing my voice, because if you're not, and if you haven't heard it from anyone else, I don't place the blame on you. It's a very tall order to ask someone to just figure it out without having been taught. It's as much as saying, hey, learn how to fish without having been taught how to fish, right? But if you are hearing my voice, my thing is for you to go out and try to find it yourself, whatever it takes. Like, it's the same thing with respect to anything that you want to be successful in, right? You go and find a mentor. You go and find a group of people that would, help you to grow. And from my perspective, that is one of the signs of hunger, right? And by hunger, I mean like you want something so bad that you are out here looking for all of the opportunities to grow and learn, and you're taking them. You're taking all of them, whether they're good or not. You'll figure out later once you have enough, reps, so you can be like, okay, this one works, this doesn't work. But at first, you take everything that's coming in, and then you figure it out. You have to stay the course, because life is tough. And here's the thing: 2 things I'm going to say. One is that we look at life as if it's supposed to be easy. My thing is, like, I tend to tell people that life is a game. And if it was entirely easy, that would be the most boring game. Like, we don't realize this. Like, when you're sitting here playing a game and you lose, like an adventure game, you lose, you might get frustrated. But that's exactly what you want in the game, is to have those obstacles. Otherwise, like, you're sitting here like you're just pushing the go button, the directional button, and then game is over. It's a terrible game. And so you have to think about this in the sense of, yes, it's going to be tough, but that's precisely the point. That's what makes it worth it. And the second thing that I want to say, I wanted to speak to what you said with respect to how we, should treat men and how they should behave. Ultimately, my relational power framework speaks specifically to this. We have been misguided and misled to thinking that power itself comes from domination, and it doesn't. And the reason is simple. One reason, as a man, we are physically stronger than the opposite sex. And so physical strength in an age where, especially when you're young, where it seems like you are dominating because of your physical strength, it seems like that's where the power comes from. It's louder. When you hear Trump or Elon Musk, being aggressive, it sounds like that's what the actual mechanism for their power is, when in fact it's mostly relational. Trump knows how to relate to people. He knows how to talk to them to make himself likable. Those are relational skills. That's what's actually getting him there where he wants to be. Whether you look at Barack Obama or, Bill Clinton, it's either relational skills or you get so good at something, people are like, well, he's the one who's got to do it. He's the one who knows it, right? And so when we think about that, we know that the people who actually have the power are sending the young men out to war, who are being, dominant. It's all about the relational skills, and even in those organizations like the military, where the idea is about violence, it's never the one who could defeat everyone. Even in criminal gangs, it's never the one who can physically dominate that becomes the leader. It's the one who can who can influence others, who can get others to support and follow him. Those are all relational skills. And so when we understand what true power comes from, then we don't have to walk around being aggressive. We can walk around saying, what does it take for me to learn how to influence, how to get people to support me, how to get people to like me? Win Friends and Influence People, man, that book, it still remains one of the best ones. We just got to actually put it to practice.
Yeah, there's so many things that when you're speaking, I just thought about in my own personal life where I had that epiphany. It was like, wow, like this is, all matching. I remember one time I was very angry. It was like in college, and I went to the gym. And I was like super mad. I don't know what I was mad about. But I was mad about something, right? You're just angry, I think, when you're young. And I went to the gym and I was lifting extremely heavy. And I got to the point where I couldn't lift anymore. Even though the animosity was still inside of me, I felt it. But I just couldn't match what my body could do with the anger I had within me. And then it was, like an epiphany or like a realization of like my anger is, like even though it feels as if it's giving me power, it's not making me any more powerful. And it was just something that, like I remember telling like other people, they're like, wow, like I had the same feeling of like, I was just so angry and I thought that anger can, push me through like to get me to where I wanted to be. And it wasn't enough. So it rings true to a lot of young men. And it's so funny because I can't tell you how many young men, again, I speak with, just helping them along the way. I had a father I listened to. But I know there's a lot of young men who don't listen to their fathers. So it's just funny how another man can talk to another young man and basically have just as much impact as someone's father could. I remember there was a man my grandmother knew, and he came to the house one day, my grandmother's house. I was over there, and he basically told me a story how his son got killed, where they were just hanging around the wrong people, and this is a drug deal gone bad, or just basketball game where it didn't turn out the right way, and so his son was running away with his friend, and then he got shot in the back. So he landed on his friend, and basically one of the last words the son had said was, just play dead. So he was covering his friend. And so he basically sacrificed himself to so his friend could live. And his friend even told the father, and the father, go on, tell the whole story about what happened from the beginning to the end. But that was something that, rang true. Like, how would a kid know how to do that? Like, to sacrifice himself, and it would only have to be from, an example from the father, from, example from, learning from others, because so many people in our world today are extremely selfish, where it's just like, I want things done for me. What can you do for me? Not what can I reciprocate to you? And so this idea also is that, men have a hard time asking for help, as we know. And they also have a hard time, admitting that they need some assistance, saying, hey, like, because asking for help and assistance is two totally different things. And at least in my book, because if you're at the gym and you can't lift this weight, are you going to ask for a spot, or you're not going to ask for a spot, right? Or are you going to try to do it yourself? And then when you have no other option but to get help, right? So you're like, that bar is on you. You're like, oh, I hope someone comes help me, right? You're like, hey, help me out, right? So it's just like, you can anticipate when you need some support. And then there's a point where you need to be saved. And I always ask, like, I tell all the people who ask me for spots, and they say, hey, you ever need a spot, come see me, right? I got you, right? And just that conversation alone, like, you could see the smile in their soul. They're like, all right, cool, right? Like, they know they have somebody who's going to help build them. And this idea of building men who are not afraid to ask for help is, I believe, more powerful than ones who try to do everything themselves, because you can only do so much by yourself. And then there's that African proverb: if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And this is this idea of too many men are just fighting this lone warrior aspect. And yeah, sure, it's very heroic. It's very admiring that someone can do it. But I mean, when you see a group of men coming together, like, think of when a situation happens, 9/11, whatever, right? Something tragic, men coming together, people coming together, and you can just do so much more than you could have done ever by yourself.
Yeah. Let me just say this, that you described it as heroic. I actually would describe it as completely the opposite. I would describe it as more cowardice. And here's why. It is the idea of not asking for help is not born out of the idea that, I can go conquer the world by myself. It's born out of not wanting to be vulnerable. And that's fear-based, right? I need to be able to do it by myself. First and foremost, nobody does it by themselves, right? Again, like you said, and you want to go far, you do it with others. Want to go fast, you do it alone. And 9 times out of 10, you're not asking for help because you want to go fast. It's because, you need the assistance, but it's like, if I ask for the assistance, I'm going to look like I don't know. And I don't want to look like I don't know how to do it. And I don't want this is the thing where where we're teaching about domination, right? No, men are so afraid of being dominated that if they go and ask, they are in essence, in their minds, a lot of times, women do this as well, but women much less so than we do. A lot of times what they feel like they're doing is they're exposing a weakness, right? I have just told this person something about me that's not good or that's not strong. And so now that could be used against me. I'm not the one who is leading in this case, in which case now you feel like somebody has gotten something over you. This is a form of pressure. Is how am I being evaluated? The truth is that the confident person is okay with their weakness because they know what their true worth is. The confident person will readily be like, I don't know this. Like, if you ever watch a confident person, in a room, they'll be the ones asking all the questions. Whereas everybody else is like, oh, I don't know if I want to look like I don't know this. The confident person is like, wait, what do you mean here? And they're going to figure, and that's why they'll go faster as well, because they're getting all the answers while you're sitting here trying to figure it out on your own. Right. And so for me, we don't realize that what's happening there is that we're scared. We're under pressure of evaluation. We're under pressure of how we're going to look. This is why public speaking is like our top fear, right? Like if I can speak to you one-on-one, for example, there's less that my mind has to focus on and calculate. Look at your facial, gestures. Does he like it? Okay, how do I recover this? Managing the entire conversation. If it's, 4 or 5 people, now I've got to do that with everybody else. And it's like, wait, what are they thinking? Did I respond to that well? And so all of that is pressure. And you have to first recognize it and you have to train for it. This is why we call it internal stability, because when you're stable internally, then all of that kind of pressure can't break you down. You can respond as you would if you felt completely comfortable, completely yourself. So that's my take on it.
Perfect. And I just love what we do here in Coaching in Session, because I bring on coaches from every different walk of life, and everyone has their own world experiences. They have their own methodologies. They have their own way of doing things. And it's so important to not just learn our way. And I think so many people are fixated on the way I've been doing something. Think of it as if you have been, playing golf a certain way, right? And you can only get so far with a certain swing. And then you get a coach come in saying, hey, if you do this to your swing or do this to your hips, all of a sudden you're going to be hitting 100 yards more than what you're doing right now, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a small modification.
Yeah.
So sometimes we have to be humble enough to say, you know what, I'm coming in and I'm taking this information, not because I know everything, but because I know I can be better from somebody else, right? They see something in me that can use some level of improvement, and why not take it? And I think so many people are fixated, I've always been doing it this way, right? And it's been working for me up until now. And then I ask, well, yeah, sure, it's been working for you up until now, but what if you could be better just because of a small tweak or a small movement, right? Just like think of how the wheel was created, right? Eventually, they perfected it to be better, right? Because before we could have just had those rough wheels with the cracks in it, made of wood. We could have still been riding around on those, but it wasn't until someone said, let's make some improvements. And I think that's so important. And the work that you do is helping people improve. And it's a process. It's not something that's done in a day or a week. It could take months for someone to truly understand what's going on inside and to become stable. And I know you have a program where you help individuals, work, over a period of time where you're starting with them. And then at the end of it, they can have some more internal stability. What is that process like when you start working with an individual?
Absolutely. So it's a 90-day program. First and foremost, I don't know if I should mention this now, if you had a chance to, or you hadn't in a place that you were going to say it, but I have a internal stability index. It's an assessment that you can take to see how you show up, what your responses are under pressure. It's a great start for folks, if they're not ready to jump straight into the program. So my program builds internal stability. It's a 90-day program. There are 3 phases, 12 weeks total. The first phase is called stability. That's where you get to see the different areas. There are certain areas that I touch upon that show themselves up regularly for folks who are trying to be themselves. There are many areas. We can't cover everything, but you start to get a sense of the ones that show up consistently. And then it's the signal. It's how you respond when you are feeling confident. It's the types of things that you already do when you're confident, but you don't realize this when the pressure hijacks how you respond. And so we kind of show you exactly what that looks like in the second phase. The third phase is the wheel. So there are multiple different pressures being, presented at the same time. And the intent of the third phase is to get you to trust yourself. And that in and of itself is what it means to not wear a mask and to be yourself. Because if you've ever been in a place where you're like, I don't know, I'm not necessarily fully myself, it's because you're not quite sure how you're going to respond when perhaps somebody slights you or says something that you don't feel like, you can respond to, because maybe your response is, politically incorrect and all that good stuff. Whereas if you're in a room full of people who have known you for years, none of that matters, because you're not sitting here trying to manage how people perceive you. They already know who you are. And that's why you can be yourself. You don't you trust your ability to handle whatever comes your way with people you know. You do not do so when you're with people you don't know. So the idea is to get you there within those 90 days and set you on a path. So we meet for an hour and a half weekly, and then I have reps that I give you that you're going to work on within yourself. Because the idea ultimately about my program that makes it different than like your traditional therapy or coaching is that I feel like I need to put you in a simulator. So it's a simulation that simulates what would happen under the circumstances. So I've gotten this because I was a psychology major from cognitive behavioral therapy. And there are a number of different organizations that use it. Marines use it as well, like putting you under pressure so you can see exactly what your judgment and your responses would be so you can acclimate, so that your nervous system can understand, okay, I've been here before, which is the difference between insight and actually gaining a new habit, right? I can know that this thing bothers me all the time, but life doesn't always afford us the opportunity to practice. You go to the gym and get reps. Life doesn't do that because, you have a situation, you're like, man, I should have done this that way. And the next time you have, even if you have an exact situation, a lot of times you might not even have an exact situation. So you don't see that it's the same pattern reoccurring. But even if you were to have that, maybe next time you see that is a year later. Everything that you said you should have done is forgotten. And so my program is about putting you into those moments over and over again so that you can get the practice that you need so that you can develop the habit that you need to become the new version of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about the confidence aspect that comes with it, because when they go through those reps and they become confident in handling those situations, even if they get a new situation, right, that they might have not dealt with, they have the confidence from the previous ones.
Absolutely. And the thing is, with the signal phase, you start to recognize the patterns that occur, right? So like so here's one that is very typical. It's breaking down under, disapproval or lack of it. I just call it disapproval. But ultimately, it would be something like you made a decision and, someone is like, I don't know if I like that. Or, or they don't necessarily even say, I don't know if I like that. Because those are the different variations that are possible, right? Maybe they don't even say, I don't know if I like that, or they don't give you their full approval. And in your mind, you're like, I need that, I need to know that you're on board so that if this thing falls apart, we all agreed that that this was the right way to go. We are afraid of the potential consequences of not having it go right. And so when you start to realize, oh, what's happening here is that I'm not getting the approval, and that's the pressure that I'm facing right now, you can then apply what you're supposed to do when that happens. Trust yourself, speak this way, hold your position, that sort of thing. So that's why it works for other circumstances as well. You get the reps, but then you get the reps of feeling that internal disruption happen. And you also get to see, okay, there's no approval here. That's what's happening. Here's how I respond to that.
When we take the person from day 1 to day 90, perhaps we could just say it takes 3 months and they're a totally different person. What's the main difference you see within them?
I would say that the main difference is part of what I described in the wheeled section. It's a sense of feeling capable of managing the situation that they're in. It's a sense of saying, okay, it's not that I've got it all, but I'm on the path and I know that I can handle it. It's a sense of, okay, this is the work, right? And I am continuously improving and I know precisely where I'm going. And that in and of itself is why it's a confidence mastery program. Because the confidence is about understanding that I'm okay with where I am and I know where I can go. And when you present that way, people respond to it accordingly.
And is the assessment that you had mentioned earlier talking about their capabilities or just how many pressures they're dealing with?
It talks about how they respond to pressure. So they will, it's a very basic, when someone pushes back at you, what do you tend to do? Do you over-explain? So it kind of gives you your pattern of, your typical responsive pattern of behavior. And that's a great thing to kind of, to be aware of so that you can be like, okay, here's me being reflexive in my actions here's what I can do instead.
Okay, that's powerful. I know when we're dealing with tough moments, sometimes we can say the wrong things and we have a moment to reflect later on in the evening and we say, I could have handled that a little bit differently. And if we can just develop those reps, as you said, we would have less of those moments, and life should be, built on no regrets rather than us making mistakes where we're like, oh, this could have been better. And I don't want to use regrets and failure in the same sentence, but we can look at our failures in a sense and say we can be better because of them. And I can't tell you how many times I've done things in my life and I'm like, man, that wasn't good. Right. When I first went into business, because I was a business major before I was an education major before I even started my business. And I just made a lot of business mistakes. There's too many. And I was just like, why did I make all of these mistakes? Looking back in hindsight, but it was because I just didn't know. No one taught me how to be a business professional per se. And I just had to learn the etiquette. I had to learn, how to move basically. And it's so funny because I can go to the hood because I grew up in the hood. I can go to the hood and I know how to move around all of those gangbangers. I got no problem doing it. Right. But then if I bring my wife or I bring someone else and they start doing the wrong thing, I look at them and go, what's wrong with you? I go, what's wrong with you? You're not supposed to do that, right? So it's just like we learn from our experiences, the good and the bad. And I think sometimes people, for some reason, they don't learn from their experiences. And would you say when someone is in that loop of just not learning from the negativities, their failures, their hardships, is it because something is inside of them that's missing or that something just hasn't clicked yet for them?
The repeating patterns. I would say if I had to answer why we do it, part of it is insight, right? We don't know why it is that we keep on doing it. We don't see the pattern that's recurring because it looks like it's different. Sometimes there are things that are outside of our line of sight, which is why it's very important to, get feedback from folks, and feedback is a thing that's, I guess dangerous because, a lot of times it comes from people and their own preferences. And so, but if you are repeatedly getting the same feedback from people who are not connected, it gives you a sign that this perhaps is, something that's real. So insight is definitely a good thing, trying to, as much as you, putting yourself in these situations as much as possible. So this is a great point here, right? It's like when you decide to go into business, you want it to learn. A lot of times people aren't looking to learn and grow, right? They are experiencing situations that give them setback. And they're not saying, how can I learn from that? They're just living, right? And so that's the number one issue. And so when you spoke about, the mistakes that you made, I think there are two different, or the mistakes, but also looking back at the mistakes. Because for me, a mistake is not that it didn't work out well. A mistake is that you behave or took an action without making the executive decision, right? And the executive decision ultimately is, if I could not fail, right? In the decision that I make, I could not fail. Would the decision still be good? And the reason for that is, I had to explain this to myself as well. The reason for that is, when the issue is about it failing, the question then is, are you just afraid of failing? Right? And so if I would not be able to fail, then that decision would work. Yes, there's a possibility. There's always possibilities that you fail. So if the decision is good and it's not based on you potentially failing, then that's the best decision that could be made. Right? And the idea is you may fail. And that's just, even if you have all of the answers, you can't boil the ocean. You can't spend forever learning it. Like Colin Powell said, you have to make decisions between 40 and 70% because you can't sit there forever learning everything. And so the fact is that you may make a decision that may not work. So to me, that's not a mistake. That's just an opportunity to course correct because you know what? That outcome didn't work out. What I also think is a mistake is, or not necessarily a mistake, one of the things that I think happens when you're looking back and saying, I could have said something differently, a lot of times it's also because of pressure. When your brain, for example, is like, man, what will happen if, or you're feeling the pressure from a boss, a status differential, it hijacks your brain, right? Now you can't think as clearly as you would. So if I'm having a conversation with someone who is my peer, who I'm not worried about, now I can have the freedom to think, be like, okay, what should I do in this position? And then make that decision. If on the other hand, you're like, oh my God, I have to get this perfect now, it's now that you don't know precisely what you should have said. You blank out, or you say something that's ridiculous, and then you're like, I could have said this. It comes in afterwards once the pressure is gone. So those are two different ways that I think about, how we make decisions. And from my perspective, if you are looking to grow, then you are looking for ways to make the best decision. And those things are not mistakes. Those are just, necessary part of becoming that expert. You have to go into the left and then bang your head there and be like, okay, left is not right. Let me go right. So that's part of it.
Yeah, very true. And there are going to be necessary parts that people have to go live and go experience. It's not going to be one of those things where everything will and can be done for you so you live a pristine life. And I know many people are living in a perfectionist type of mindset where they don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to have any failures. They want everything to be perfect. And this is maybe possibly one of the reasons why people don't take enough action, is because if I don't take action, then I don't fail.
Yeah.
But then you have a mindset of, if you're not taking action and you're not getting to where you want to be, are you failing just by the choice of not taking action or being deliberate? And this is all, full insight now, where we can say, hey, if we don't see the patterns, if we don't see how we're operating, then that means we need someone to be able to look at our blind spots, to be able to look in the areas where we can't possibly see right now. And this is why I always say, everyone needs a coach. Everyone needs someone who can support them in some level or area of their life, whether it be their personal or their business. Because if we're trying to level up, if we're trying to be in a different situation by the end of the year, we can keep on doing the same things we have been doing and maybe have some marginal difference at the end. Or we can just say, hey, I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to invest in learning about the blind spots that I have, the patterns that I don't see, so I can address those. And then I can be in a totally different realm. And it could be a scary thing to, admit that you are going to be shining some light in some of those areas. People put skeletons in closets for a reason. People sweep things under the rug for a reason, but it's often for not the good reasons, right? Your growth, your potential, those are some of the things that you shouldn't be shying away from. So if our conversation today was definitely one where that was like invigorating you, or that was making you hungry for trying or learning about things in your life, then I encourage you, now is the time to take some action. And, one of the things I always like to do at the end is to get some final thoughts, some final words. And then, Mackens, if you could, can you please tell everyone how they can find you, whether it be the men listening to the podcast or the wives saying, hey, this is my husband, he needs some backup, right? How can they reach out and find you? So just some final words, final thoughts, and then how they can reach out to you.
Awesome. And yes, I want to also say, a lot of my listeners or the people who follow me are women, precisely because, they want to share my podcast, or no, not podcast. Really, I have a YouTube channel where I do some things, but I'm on Instagram. The handle is 11 kilometers, 11 km per second, PER second. And just real quickly, I took that name from the speed at which something must move in order to escape Earth's gravity. So it's a metaphor for moving at the speed that it takes for us to, overcome the things that hold us back so we can soar into the heavens. So that's my website as well, 11kilometerspersecond.com. There you will be able to find the assessment and also the ability to schedule a call with me. I kind of did that backwards, but my final thought is ultimately, my primary, what we call ideal client are Black men, both because I am a Black man and I know myself. And one of the things they say in business is, if you can make yourself the client, then you know yourself very well enough to be able to, solve their problems. But also because, I feel like we need this in our community to empower ourselves. Our women actually have been doing a great job holding us down for a very long time. And we've gotten to the position and a point where we are at each other's throats because women are fed up. The economy is terrible. And, it's also an economy where it is a service economy. And so like the manual labor is not available for men anymore. And so women are making more than men. and it's causing a lot of upheaval. Whereas we focused on trying to get women, empower women through, the feminist movement, and I'm all for it. What happened is that we misunderstood that men actually knew what the heck they were doing. In fact, the reason why men succeeded is because they were the only ones that had access. And by they, I meant white men, not black men. White men had access. But even then, the service economy and, globalization is kicking their asses as well. And this is the reason why you're getting that kind of resentment that gave us the Donald Trump, for example. They're looking to empower themselves with anger. And you discussed this, anger feels like it's power, but it hasn't done anything, right? And so men are struggling. I focus on Black men because we need to help our community. And that is my final thought.
All right, perfect. And I'm going to put the website, the Instagram handle, so people can find you, they can follow you, they can learn more about the work that you're doing, helping men get into a place where they are capable, where they're secure, and they can begin thriving in not only their businesses, but also in their personal family lives. And it's so important today because if we don't have good examples of men, especially Black men, it's going to be just one of those status quos of prejudice, right? Like this person is always going to be this type of way, or they're always going to be this type of person. I just think of like a individual like Ben Carson, as an example of someone who grew up with a single mother, who grew up in a very rough neighborhood, and like a situation that wasn't as privileged. He was able to do something. And right now, if you feel as if you're at the end of the road, as if you can't do something, I encourage you to reach out to Mackens to learn about the possibilities that are available to you. And once you can see the possibilities, the only thing that must be done for you is to act. So take action today to some level, to some degree. And Mackens, thank you so much for coming out and spending some time sharing some of your wisdom, some of your thoughts, and then, of course, being that beacon for many of the men in our world today.
It was a pleasure, Michael. I appreciate you for inviting me over. And, anytime we can continue the conversation, I had a great time. I'd love to stay in touch and continue the work that we do.